This video is about doing research in the area of professional responsibility. These are the basic steps when you have an issue that deals with legal ethics. First, you want to identify the issue. So does it have to do with client funds, candor to a tribunal, conflict of interest? You want to look at the primary law. So the primary law would be the state rules of professional responsibility for the jurisdiction the question is in. You want to look for case laws that interpret the rule. You want to see if there are state agency or bar association ethics opinions or disciplinary decisions. You can review comments following the rule. You can refer to cases in other states interpreting a rule that's similar. Of course, those are not mandatory authority, but it could be helpful. Research ABA materials and also seek additional commentary, so other secondary sources. So these are the steps we're going to go through in this PowerPoint, and we're going to be doing some online searching as well. So I wanted you to keep in mind that professional ethics, attorneys are admitted to practice in a particular state. So when we're researching ethics, even though we can find resources of more general applicability like ABA materials, or we can sometimes look to precedent in other states, what we really want to find, as in all legal questions, is the mandatory authority in our state. So what is the hierarchy of authority in legal ethics issues? So the mandatory authority, it's basically the same as what we've been looking at all along: constitutions, statutes, interpretive case law. And then we have the state rules of professional responsibility. We're going to talk about how to find those. And court decisions interpreting ethical rules. So what are the persuasive forms? Well, this is really an area of administrative law. So as we know from looking at administrative law, sometimes administrative decisions can be persuasive. In the area of legal ethics, we have ethics opinions, both formal and informal. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We have disciplinary proceedings, which are for a particular attorney. And we have secondary sources, which sometimes they can be persuasive, especially ones like the restatement of law governing lawyers. So let's talk a little bit about the ABA model rules. So just as with other model codes or rules, the ABA model rules are not enforceable in a state until the state has adopted it. So the ABA model rules have been adopted in 49 states' ethical codes. Of course, they might have not adopted it word for word, so we will have to look at the differences if we're relying on the ABA model rule. If we're looking for that for some kind of guidance, what is the difference between the model rule and the state rule? Okay. So where can we find the model rules of professional conduct? So I've given you a couple of ways to go about it. In Westlaw Next, you can just type ABA model rules into the Go bar, and that source will pop right up. On Westlaw Classic, I've given you the breadcrumbs, how you would go in and find it. On Lexis Advanced, it doesn't work to type it just in the Go bar, but as we've seen with other sources, we can use Browse Sources, type the title in and browse sources. If we're using Lexis.com, we want to go in Legal, Area of Law by Topic, and once we're in those ethical materials, we're going to have a lot of choices, including the ABA Model Rules of Professional Conduct. There is an online version freely available at the ABA website, and I've given you the link to that. And there's also that version that's online is not annotated, and there is an annotated version that's also available in print. I want to quickly take a look at the ethical materials that are available in Westlaw Classic and Lexis.com by subject area so that you can get a sense of the materials that are available on Westlaw and Lexis. Okay, so this is the default page on Westlaw Classic, and I'm going to go through the directory, and I'm going to look at topical practice areas, and I want to find legal ethics and professional responsibility. And we were talking about the ABA model rules, and they would be under the American Bar Association materials. But also, if you look here, you can see there are a lot of other databases that could be useful that would satisfy the research steps that we were talking about earlier. So the ABA Association materials are located here, And the annotated model rules of professional conduct is this database here. So you can see that right there. Just like on Westlaw Classic, when we're on Lexis.com, we can go in area of law by topic. And we want to look for ethics is the title that they've given it on Lexis. And again, by looking at this page, you can get an idea of the types of materials that are available on Lexis in the area of ethics, so professional responsibility research. And there are a lot more materials than just the ABA materials we're talking about. But this is the database, ABA Model Rule of Professional Conduct. And it also has the ABA codes and ethics opinions combined. So these are unannotated, but by looking in this ABA codes and ethics opinions combined database, we can run one search, look at the ABA model rules and ethics opinions at the same time. Okay. So again, it can be useful to look at ABA materials, including the model rule, or we'll also talk about ethical opinions we can find, but they're just persuasive. They're not binding because they're not the law of the state. Okay. I just wanted to briefly mention there is a prior ABA code. It's called the Model Code of Professional Responsibility, and I've given you a link to the unannotated version. And the only reason really you would use this would be for historical research. So if you needed to find out how a state's code, so how, for example, our state, the Massachusetts code, varies from the ABA code, how would you go about doing that? Well, there's a couple of ways. You can look at the annotated version of the state code and look at the commentary of the code. So they'll often talk about why the rule that's been adopted by the state, how it differs from the ABA model rules, and why. And there's also I'm going to skip the second one because we're going to go online and look at the ABA website in just a minute. There's a really good source that we're going to look at in a lot of different areas. It's sort of a combination of a secondary source and it has primary materials. It's called the ABA BNA Lawyer's Manual, and it has a section called State Ethics Rules Variations. So that could give you an idea of why the state code varies or how it varies. This source is available on Westlaw Classic, and I've given you the database identifier. You can also find it by going in area of law by topic. It is not on Westlaw Next yet. And you can find it on Lexis, also going in by area of law under ethics. And again, not available on Lexis Advanced yet. It is a BNA database on the Law Library's A to Z list, and we're going to look at it for another area we're going to look at. So I'm not going to go into it right now, but it's a really good source for looking at issues in the area of professional responsibility. So let's just take a quick minute to go out to the ABA website, and I want to show you where the charts in the comments are that talk about how the states have adopted the versions of the ABA code and how it's different. So I'm on the ABA Center for Professional Responsibility on their policy page. And over on the right, you can see we have the Model Rules of Professional Conduct. That was that unannotated free version we were talking about earlier. And we were talking about how to tell the states, the difference of the states adopting, what the rules are and how they're different in the states. So if we scroll down on the right, there's a chart on the status of state review of model laws, a chart comparing the revised state rules to model rules, and a chart comparing state variations, and a list of the state adoption of the model rules. Let's just take a quick look at the charts. We can look at Massachusetts as our example. And when you click in, you can see that it tells you Massachusetts didn't adopt Rule 1.0. It did adopt Rule 1.1, and it's the same as the model rule. Rule 1.2 it adopted, but there were some changes, etc. So how can we find the state ethics codes online? Because it's really the state ethics codes of the jurisdiction that we're in that we want to be primarily concerned with when we're looking at a legal issue. So the ABA Center for Professional Responsibility has links to all the state codes, the state ethical codes, and it also includes some other material there as well. You can read that. Lexis and Westlaw, you can look with the state materials along with the statutes, and normally they'll be in with the court rules. Okay. Sometimes also when you're looking on Lexis.com or Westlaw Classic, you can go in by topic area and then narrow down that way. So you can go in by ethics or legal ethics. So let's just take a quick look. We'll just use Westlaw Next as our example for this. So on Westlaw Next, just as if I was looking for court rules, I can go State Materials, Massachusetts, Statutes and Court Rules, and then if I scroll down and I look at the Massachusetts rules, I can find the rules of the SJC, and under Rule 307, I can see the Massachusetts Rules of Professional Conduct. And this gives me all the different rules that have to do with professional conduct. So let's just take a quick look at Rule 3.3, for example. Candor toward the tribunal. And this gives us the text of the rules, the credits, the editor's notes, so some information about why they adopted these standards. And at the top, we can also link to notes of decision, so this is annotated, the history of this rule, the citing references, so we can key cite this rule, which is great. So we can find additional sources that have discussed this rule of professional ethics in Massachusetts, including cases, administrative decisions, secondary sources. So let's look at our last slide that has to do with mandatory authority, finding court cases, interpreting rules. So this is like we would look for like we looked for court rules. So we can use an annotated version of your state rules on Lexis or Westlaw. We just saw that on Westlaw. We could key cite the state rules. There's no shepherdizing for these rules, so we would have to use key cite. We could look at secondary sources for court cases. So for example, we talked about the ABA BNA Lawyer's Manual, which is a good source for that. So those are, I think, the easiest way. And then, of course, we could look in a case law database, so a general case law database. Or on Westlaw Classic, they've grouped a couple of different databases together that have to do with ethics cases. On Lexis.com, we could go in by area of law, ethics, and find cases. We could use those databases. And the same on Lexis Advanced, we could go in by practice area, legal ethics. I'm going to break this video into two parts because it's getting kind of long. And so this will be the end of part 1 on research in ethics and professional responsibility issues.